So, I guess the Terran Empire citizens have to decide between Empress Georgiou, a woman representing the decades-long status quo that has been oppressing everyone, and Gabriel Lorca, a man who's spouting fascist rhetoric like Make America Great Again. Man, sometimes Star Trek is just totally unrelatable to the modern day, am I right? And welcome to my ongoing retro review series of Star Trek Discovery Season 1 being done in preparation for the premiere of Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season in less than a week. I am very pumped, but before we get there, we need to quickly wrap up the Mirror Universe arc of Discovery's first season, because the show itself seems to wish to wrap up the Mirror Universe storyline just as quickly, because we're already at its final episode with What's Past is Prologue. What's Past is Prologue earnestly feels like it could and should have been the season finale, with it being a big bombastic climax to the ongoing storyline with Lorca and the Mirror Universe so far. And if my theory that the season's original 13 episode order was expanded to 15, mainly to flesh out the pilot episodes, this might have been the original finale plan. What's Past is Prologue builds off of last episode's final reveal of Lorca being from the Mirror Universe, leading into him attempting to stage a coup against Empress Georgiou, providing the storyline its greatest strength, and yet also laying bare the weakness of this whole storyline's rushed feel. Lorca presents a strong, formidable antagonist, one who we understand because we have seen how he functions as a leader. On top of that, his rhetoric to his Terran rebels that we hear throughout the episode perfectly matches a man who seeks not to overthrow the fascist government, but to place himself at its head. Something that we know he is capable of doing, again, because we've seen him all season use those same tactics with the Discovery crew.
But I have returned to give meaning to your suffering. Today is the day we reclaim our empire.
His lines like, "I give meaning to your suffering," show how Lorca is working to equate himself with his soldiers' purpose, and then equating himself with the Empire, a tactic that authoritarians often use to work to use nationalistic fervor to fuel their own aggrandizement. Lorca also makes appeal to the need to protect the Terran racial purity, tying nicely into similar ideas spouted by T'Kuvma in the Klingon War storyline earlier this season, allowing for a nice thematic bridge between the Klingons and Terrans as both fascistic juxtapositions to the Federation's ethos of infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
You let alien races spill over the borders, flourish in our backyard, and have the gall to incite rebellion.
We come in peace.
Attack there!
I also love that Lorca constantly appeals to destiny, which he uses to argue that his right to rule is God-given, justified, and inevitable, which is another fascistic tactic.
But nothing that's happened to me was an accident. Not ending up in another world, not finding a ship that would help me return here. None of it. I'm living proof that fate is real.
It's just a fascistic regurgitation of things like the divine right of kings. All that praise being said though, I do wish we had had more time in the Mirror Universe itself to really see how Lorca exploits grievances against Philippa Georgiou for his own ends. While Lorca's words fit his intention to overthrow Georgiou but not her governmental structure, as well as highlighting how fascism just creates endless loops of infighting between fascists who are only seeking personal power, we never actually really get a sense of why Lorca is so appealing to his soldiers. Given that we've never really seen how the Terran Empire works on a ground level within Discovery itself, we're never really given a chance to see how people like Mirror Universe Landry feel about this Georgiou or this world, and why they would choose to follow Lorca. And as a result, Lorca's words come off as simple, empty rhetoric instead of allowing for a deeper examination of how fascists exploit existing anxieties to create us versus them narratives that prop themselves up, and leads to them gaining followings and power in the first place. The reason that I bring this up here is because the Klingon War storyline actually at least gave us hints of this, with things like Voke's storyline of being an albino Klingon and facing racism as a result, something that T'Kuvma exploits within the pilot episode, in order to make Voke one of his most loyal followers.
Dearlich den legde op doe leg. Of dat neslo bit pong jicht. Shochdak jileg
In fact, this episode mildly undermines Lorca's convictions when he praises Saru in front of his Terran soldiers, which feels weird given his human superiority stance and Mirror Universe Kelpians' place within the Terran Empire as slaves and food.
Mr. Saru, it's good to see you. I'm glad I got a chance to say goodbye to you and the rest of the crew. I want you to know that my admiration for you was and is sincere.
Like, for example, wouldn't it have been interesting if we had seen Lorca actually use the Kelpians of the Mirror Universe as part of his revolt, promising to give them some level of place within his Terran Empire without actually really changing the dynamic of humans being superior to other races? But given that we don't see something like that, it feels to me like Lorca praising Saru in front of his soldiers would make his soldiers go, wait, is he praising one of those inferior life forms? That's really weird for our leader to be doing. That being said, his praise for Saru and the Discovery crew is only filtered through their ability to be good soldiers for him, which fits.
Now look at you, I see a formidable unit of soldiers that I sculpted. I thought for a second that any of you were capable of relinquishing this cult-like devotion to the Federation. I'd enlist your skills.
But ultimately, the main problem with Discovery's use of Lorca in this episode is that it mostly pulls from modern-day political associations, with Lorca's lines like, "Make the Empire glorious again," very clearly relating to Donald Trump and even more obliquely Ronald Reagan's "Make America Great Again" slogans.
A future where we together will make the Empire glorious again.
Now, to be very clear, I am not against Star Trek being explicit in its ties to critiquing direct real-life politics, and I think it's totally fitting that Lorca would use rhetoric like this. But if you're going to use something as overt as that, it should come tethered to something grounded within this storyline, lest it rely too much on the audience's preconceptions around someone like Donald Trump. And let me be very clear in what I mean by this, because this is where I think many people who wish to use science fiction stories to relate to modern day fail, because they often just assume that the audience that they are speaking to has the same association with the thing that they are pulling from in real life, without actually taking time within the story to show how this thing is directly parallel to the thing that they are pulling from. As a result, it risks pushing out someone who actually doesn't have the same association of Trump being a fascistic, bigoted asshole, rather than asking them to question their beliefs in an authoritarian like Trump, as it might reflect the horrors of characters like Lorca that they are watching. Again, I am all here for saying Trump bad, but if you're going to do a storyline that goes and says someone like Trump is bad, you should actually work to show how Lorca actually is very similar to Trump, rather than just through spouting off the same slogans. And I don't really feel like this show has done the groundwork in order to show that beyond just the ideology that we've seen presented within Lorca this entire season. To be very clear, Trump supporters are awful, and I'm not against provoking them from time to time, but don't just do so just to do so, lest your critiques ultimately feel shallow and hollow. It's what allows people like the outrage merchants here on YouTube to go, "Oh, this TV show hates you and hates white men," because you're not actually doing depth of the critique. To be fair to the show, the point that they are trying to make with Lorca turning out to actually be a fascist is to show how easily fascist ideals can weave their way into even the institutions that say they stand against it. Again, making that direct parallel to someone like Trump. However, by then making him a cartoonish-esque fascist in the Mirror Universe, it dilutes this point because it makes it seem like these problems can be an exterior threat that we can extinguish, rather than something that can grow within something like the Federation or America itself. But this point would have been made much more powerful if the show had taken time to show a greater parallel between the Mirror Universe Terran Empire and the Federation itself, rather than just relying on simplistic tropes or cartoonish-esque versions of fascism. And we can tell that this is true because everything that Lorca does this episode actually simplifies his character. But when we look back at his actions earlier this season when he was pretending to be a Federation officer using fascistic tactics, it makes those episodes have much more depth. If only the outed fascist version of Lorca had been given the same amount of treatment, it would have made this an incredibly powerful critique. As it stands, it just makes post-reveal Lorca a simplified cartoon. All that That being said, this episode does have much to love on a character and thematic level. I love that Mirror Universe Stamets ratted Lorca out to Georgiou, showing that he's a little coward who cares only for himself rather than what our Stamets in the Prime Universe is like, who is shown, despite his gruff first impression, to be someone who truly cares for both ethics within science and the well-being of others, whether they be human or tardigrade, allowing both Stametses to feel like true mirrors of each other, something that I wish we had gotten more of. However, this does lead to a storyline where we learn that Mirror Universe Stamets has been exploiting the mycelial network, causing it to possibly collapse, which leads to this storyline getting the entire universe and multiverse is in danger level stakes. Something that has really started to tire me with its repeated usage over and over and over again in both Discovery and Star Trek Picard's season finales.
The network will continue to deteriorate everywhere. Here in this universe, back in ours, across the entire multiverse.
And when it does,
Life as we know it will cease to exist.
The universe-ending stakes are subtler here in this episode and actually do a good job of tying the misuse of the mycelial network to things like the overuse of fossil fuels and the extraction of resources by colonialist powers, and feels much less like the needless random noise that we get in something like Star Trek Discovery Season 2's finale or Picard Season 1's finale. But its appearance here did pave the way for more of it down the road within Star Trek, and dear God, do I never wish to hear a variation of all life in the galaxy as we know it will cease to exist in a Star Trek show again. Please, Star Trek writers, hear me. The stakes do not always need to be Federation, universe, or multiverse ending all the damn time to make me interested. In fact, it often makes me less so. I do, however, adore Saru stepping up as captain upon learning that he might be sending his crew on a suicide mission, showing his growth this season from someone who was fearful and willing to run away from a fight in the pilot to someone who will fight when necessary, but not doing so just for its own sake, but in order to protect others and, given the episode's stakes, all life in the multiverse.
Lorca abused our idealism. And make no mistake, Discovery is no longer Lorca's. She is ours. And today will be her maiden voyage.
He's also become a leader who inspires others around him, in contrast to Lorca, who only motivated through fear. Michael Burnham also gets a ton to do this episode, and it mostly all works well. Saru's concern for Burnham's safety speaks to their healed friendship this season, and Burnham also trying to convince Georgiou that she knows Lorca also speaks to how Burnham realizes how her kindness, curiosity, and trauma have been manipulated by Lorca all season, allowing her to finally become self-aware of how she reacts to such things and change her behavior as a result. Something that will pay off in the season finale. Lorca's appeals to Burnham, saying that she needs to exist in the real world and that she belongs in the mirror universe, also mirrors how fascists like to paint hope and belief in community as fantasies that don't reflect real human nature of survival of the fittest, something that Burnham rejects, realizing that Lorca is only able to believe that and instill it in others by his repeatedly traumatizing himself and those around him, like he has been doing to the Discovery crew all season during the Klingon War.
because you belong here.
With you?
In the real world. I know that's hard for you to see right now, because you're blinded by your emotions.
The only thing I was blinded by was you.
I also love that these changes in Burnham is reflected in her choosing to save Georgiou at the end of the episode. Not only because it's showing Burnham able to save Georgiou, unlike how she was in the pilot episode, but also shows that Burnham is not blinded by anger and is willing to value life, even the worst people's lives like Empress Georgiou, when Burnham has a chance to save them and their death would serve nothing. The episode's climax, too, is great on a pure spectacle level. The action is fantastic, even if Burnham does hold a phaser the wrong way for a single shot that people meme to death. All of it leads to the wonderfully cathartic defeat of Lorca, a character who I earnestly wish we had gotten more of, as he's a fantastic villain and foil for our main character and Star Trek in general. And I seriously wish and hope that we get a chance to see either Mirror Universe or Prime Lorca back at some point within Star Trek, either on Strange New Worlds or somewhere else. In the end, what's past is Prologue, like most of the Mirror Universe arc that it is wrapping up, is the best possible version of what it could have been given the pieces and time frame that it's working with. Rewatching this whole arc has gotten me to appreciate it a hell of a lot more, but also see so much of its missed potential. Not due to anything that it failed to do within its few episodes, but just that it had so much more that it could have done if it had a bit more room to breathe. As it stands, however, this is a solid ending to a solid, if rushed, arc. But, speaking of rushed, it's time to get back to the Klingon War arc to finish out Star Trek Discovery's first season in our next and final retro review. But what did you think of this episode? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below, and beyond all of that, I hope you, my friends, live long and prosper.